In any sport, from the little leagues all the way to the world championships, the line between winning and losing can be unbelievably thin. So today, in this explainer, we're going to build a blueprint to find that winning edge. We're moving way beyond just guesswork to create a clear, data-driven strategy for success. So let's just start with the biggest question of all. What really separates the winners from everybody else? It's not just raw talent, it's definitely not just luck. The real answer? Well, it lies in having a system, a method for understanding what truly drives performance. For a long, long time, sports were run the old way. It was all gut feelings, tradition, and just subjective opinions. You can probably picture a coach who, when you ask, why are we doing this drill, just says, because that's how we've always done it. The source material actually calls this pseudoscience, but the new way, well, it trades all that guesswork for a scientific, data-driven strategy that gives you real, objective insights. So let's build that blueprint together. Here's the game plan. First, we're going to figure out the single most important winning question. Then we'll deconstruct your sports demands, build what's called a performance model, define some truly actionable KPIs, and finally, look at how to actually apply all this in the real world. Okay, let's get started with step one. And honestly, this is the most fundamental piece of the whole puzzle, defining your target. Before you can even think about measuring anything, you have to know exactly what you're aiming for. This is called the performance objective, or PO for short. Now, this isn't some vague hope. It's a crystal clear, quantifiable definition of what winning looks like. Is your goal a championship title, or is it shaving half a second off your 100-meter dash time? You have to establish this single, ultimate goal first because it's the anchor for your entire strategy. Think of it this way. You absolutely must know the destination before you draw the map. It's just that simple. Your performance objective, that's your destination. It's your North Star. Every single decision you make, every drill you run, every metric you track has to guide you toward that one point. If it doesn't, you're not collecting data. You're just collecting noise. So once we have our target locked in, we need to figure out what it's going to take to get there. And that means we have to deconstruct the sport into its fundamental building blocks, what we'll call the 4 pillars of performance. The formal term for this whole process is a needs analysis. It sounds complicated, but it's really just a systematic way of digging in and finding out the true demands of a sport. So for a sport like basketball, it's not enough to say players need to be athletic. A proper needs analysis asks questions like, how much time do they spend sprinting versus jogging? How many times do they jump in a game? What kinds of decisions are they forced to make under extreme fatigue? This is the deep understanding that really shapes effective training. Now, what's great is that the complexity of pretty much any sport can be broken down into these 4 key areas. First, you've got physiological, that's the body, your engine, your strength, and endurance. Then psychological, that's the mind, your focus, your resilience under pressure. Third is technical, which covers the specific skills, like a perfect free throw or a golf swing. And finally, tactical. That's the strategy, the in-game decision-making. Every single sport is a unique mix of these 4 pillars. Okay, so once you've identified those key demands, you need to understand how they all fit together, how they interact. And that brings us to step 3, building the performance model by creating a hierarchy of success. And this is an absolutely crucial concept to get. Elite performance is never, ever about just one thing. There are no silver bullets here. Just being the strongest person on the field doesn't guarantee you're going to win. Success is really more like a pyramid, built on a foundation of connected factors. And you need a holistic model to see how it all stacks up. And here is how you build that picture. It's called a deterministic model. You start at the very top with your goal, let's say an elite 800-meter run. Okay, so what determines that? Well, primarily, it's going to be physiological and tactical abilities. Now, let's just follow that physiological path down. What does that break down into? Well, secondary factors, like aerobic capacity. And how do you measure that? With very specific, measurable metrics, like VO2 max. You see? It creates this clear, logical chain reaction from your ultimate goal all the way down to the specific data you can actually track in training. This logical chain leads us straight to the most important output of this whole model. Selecting the right key performance indicators, or KPIs. This is all about choosing the few metrics that genuinely matter and ignoring the rest. So, what makes some random metric a true KPI? Well, for one, it has to be a quantifiable measure that's tied directly back to your performance objective. And, critically, KPIs can measure 2 different things.
They can measure the work you actually perform. That's called external load, like lifting a certain amount of weight, but they can also measure how your body responds to that work. That's internal load, like what your heart rate is doing during that lift. And you really need both.
So how do you separate a useful KPI from what's basically just a vanity metric? Well, it has to pass this simple three-part test. It's got to be measurable, it's got to be objective, and most importantly, it has to be actionable. That last one, that's the real test. If a number doesn't help you or a coach make a specific decision, like we should change the training plan or we need to adjust our in-game strategy, then it's just noise. It is not a real KPI. And you can, and you absolutely should, apply KPIs across all 4 of those demand areas we talked about. For a physiological measure, yeah, you could track blood lactate to see how the body is responding. For a technical skill, it could be as simple as shot accuracy percentage. And for team tactics, you could use something like a heat map to analyze zone entries and see which plays are actually working. Each one is a super targeted measure of a specific piece of the performance puzzle. Okay, now we get to the final, and you could argue the most important part of this whole process, actually applying the blueprint. Because all the data, all the models, all the fancy KPIs, they mean absolutely nothing if you don't consider the people and the context. I just love this quote from Dr. Duncan French that was in this source material. We don't work in a sports industry. We work in a people industry. It's such a powerful reminder that behind all the numbers, all the analysis, it's the human element that truly, truly drives success. For any of this to work, these human factors are completely non-negotiable. An athlete's personal history and their beliefs, well, that's going to shape how they respond to any program. Every team has its own unique culture, its own language, and you have to be able to speak it to be heard. But maybe most importantly, if the coach and the athlete don't buy in, if they don't trust the process, then even the most scientifically perfect data model is absolutely destined to fail. So there you have it. That's the KPI blueprint. It's a clear 4-step process to move from just guessing to having a real strategy. You start by defining a clear performance objective. Then you conduct a needs analysis across those 4 pillars. You build a model to map out how success happens. And finally, you select and apply actionable KPIs, always within the human context of your sport. Which brings me to a final question for you. Now that you have this blueprint, what do you think is the most underrated or maybe overlooked KPI in your sport? What's that one metric that could be a total game changer but just isn't getting the attention it deserves? Let us know what you think in the comments.